Sunlight, thick as honey, poured through the penthouse windows overlooking Central Park, painting the living room in a warm glow. Ava slumped on the plush sofa, the pages of her novel blurring in front of her. Her mind was miles away, replaying memories of Ethan, his easy smile, their shared dreams of a life far removed from the gilded cage of her family's expectations. The illusion of peace shattered as the heavy oak doors burst open with a sharp crack. Ava's breath hitched, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. The sound of her father, Robert's, determined footsteps always meant business. And today, there was an edge to his stride, a grim intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. Robert entered, his face etched with the familiar severity she knew so well. His tailored suit, as always, was impeccable, ready for a boardroom battle even at home. He was a man carved from granite, his sharp features bearing the marks of time and the sacrifices he constantly reminded them he'd made for the family. Ava often wondered if those sacrifices were for the family name or to systematically dismantle any chance she had at forging her own path. "We need to talk," he stated, his voice dry and clipped, wasting no time on pleasantries. Ava stiffened. That tone. It always preceded something significant, something unpleasant. She set the book aside, her throat suddenly dry. "What is it, Dad?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, dreading the answer. Robert moved deliberately, settling into the leather armchair by the unlit fireplace. He crossed his legs, his gaze locking onto Ava, cold and piercing like glacial ice. "You're getting married, Ava. It's the only way to save this family." The words hit her like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. Ava's jaw dropped, her mind struggling to process the sheer absurdity of his statement. Time seemed to warp, the world around her losing all definition. You're joking," she stammered, her voice trembling, disbelieving. "Married? To whom?" Robert's expression remained unyielding, devoid of any humor. He had no patience for jokes or lengthy explanations. Life was a series of transactions, a cold exchange of value. "Victor Sterling," he continued, his tone leaving no room for argument. "A powerhouse in the hotel industry, a billionaire. He's prepared to invest what's necessary to rescue our company, but in return he requires a wife, someone young, presentable, to accompany him to events." Ava almost laughed, the proposal so grotesquely comical. Victor Sterling. She barely knew him, a shadowy figure from stuffy charity galas, old enough to be her grandfather, rumored to be ruthless and devoid of warmth. Marriage to him? It was unthinkable, a macabre joke. "Dad, you're serious? Marry a man I hardly know, a man I don't love? That's insane." Ava's voice rose, panic clawing at her throat. Robert raised a brow as if weary of his daughter's emotional outbursts. Emotions were simply obstacles on the path to success. "You don't understand, Ava," he began, his voice hardening. "Our company is on the verge of collapse. Years of misfortune, volatile markets. We're sinking fast. Victor Sterling is our lifeline. He wants you as his wife, and you will be." Ava felt the floor give way beneath her. Everything she held dear, every dream she cherished, was crumbling around her. Her father was offering her up, a sacrificial lamb, to salvage his empire. Her visions of freedom, of a life with Ethan, were being ripped away, deemed worthless. What about Ethan? The words escaped before she could stop them, a desperate plea. "What about the man I love, Dad? Did you even consider him?" Robert scoffed, his patience evaporating. "Ethan is irrelevant. He's a mechanic, Ava. A man with no ambition, no prospects. He can never provide the life you deserve, or keep this family afloat. I'm trying to protect you. This marriage is our only salvation." Anger ignited within Ava, a wildfire consuming her. "Protect me? Forcing me to marry a stranger is protecting me?" "Yes," he replied without hesitation. "You think you know what's best for you, but you don't. Ethan can't offer you what Victor can. This marriage is an alliance, not some fairy tale romance." Tears welled in Ava's eyes, but she fought them back. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. "So you're selling me for money? Like I'm some commodity in a business deal?" "I'm securing your future," Robert corrected, rising abruptly, his gaze intensifying to glacial ice. "You have until the end of the month to prepare. The wedding will be soon. Victor is already handling the arrangements." He strode towards the door, not sparing her another glance, leaving Ava alone in the now frigid, desolate room. The click of the closing door echoed through the silent hallways, followed by a deafening quiet. Ava stood frozen, invisible chains binding her. This wasn't the father who had once held her hand, who had read her bedtime stories. That man was gone, replaced by someone who saw her as nothing more than a pawn. She wanted to scream, but no sound escaped her lips. How had her life devolved into this nightmare? And how could she possibly tell Ethan? How could she explain that their dreams, their future, were being obliterated by a decision that was not hers to make? Fear and despair engulfed her, but beneath the crushing weight, a spark of defiance flickered. She wouldn't surrender without a fight. The morning air in Manhattan was thick, oppressive, despite the faint breeze that rustled the leaves in Central Park. The overcast sky mirrored the storm raging inside Ava. She hadn't slept, the night a relentless cycle of tossing and turning, Richard's words echoing in her mind like a death knell. Marriage to Victor Sterling. The idea was grotesque, yet to Robert, it was the perfect solution, the only solution. At the breakfast table, she watched her father unfold the New York Times, oblivious or perhaps deliberately indifferent, to the emotional earthquake he had just unleashed. The silence between them was a suffocating weight, broken only by the clinking of silverware against porcelain. Each bite of food felt like lead, a symbolic swallowing of her own impending doom. Ava could barely breathe, the anxiety of physical pressure crushing her chest. She couldn't remain in this opulent prison, not with the man who was so casually bartering her life. Suddenly, the scraping of her chair against the polished floor shattered the oppressive quiet. Ava stood abruptly, offering no explanation. Robert didn't even look up from his newspaper. She fled, her breath ragged, her feet pounding the rain-slicked sidewalks. The urgency to reach Ethan, her anchor, intensified with every step. He was her only solace, the only one who could offer strength when her world was collapsing. She needed to see him, to feel his touch, to find a glimmer of hope in his eyes. More than anything, she needed a way out. Let's play a little trick on those who only read the comments. They won't understand. Comment Brigo in the comments, and only those who got this far will get it. Now let's continue with the story. The roar of the auto shop hit Ava like a physical force, the smell of oil and hot metal thick in the air. But none of it mattered. She spotted Ethan instantly, grease smeared across his cheek, his brow furrowed in concentration as he wrestled with the engine of a vintage Mustang. Tears blurred her vision. "Ethan!" Her voice cracked, barely audible above the din of the shop. Ethan's head snapped up, his blue eyes widening when he saw her. He tossed his wrench onto the workbench, ripped off his gloves, and rushed towards her. "Ava, what is it? What's wrong?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "You're crying." Ava grabbed his arm, pulling him out of the shop, away from the curious glances of his co-workers. They stopped in a deserted alleyway, the city's cacophony muted by the brick walls. She released his arm, feeling like a dam about to burst. "Ethan, my father, he wants me to get married," she gasped, the words tumbling out in a rush of desperation. Ethan frowned, confusion clouding his features. "Married? To who? Why?" "Victor Sterling." The name tasted like ash on her tongue. Ethan's face darkened instantly. He's going to save my family's company, and in return, my father wants me to marry him." Fury flashed in Ethan's eyes, and he stepped back, as if physically recoiling from the absurdity of it all. "This is insane, Ava. You're not marrying some dinosaur you don't even know, not for your father, not for some failing company." Ava shook her head, tears now streaming down her face. "I don't know what to do, Ethan. My father says we'll lose everything if I don't go through with it. He actually thinks he's doing the right thing." Ethan's jaw tightened. He reached out, cupping her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Then don't do it, Ava. We can run. We can leave all this behind. Start over somewhere else. I don't care about the money or your father's company. I just want you. And I know you love me. Why stay in this nightmare?" She stared at him, a desperate hope flickering within her. Running away with Ethan, escaping this suffocating life, it sounded like a dream, a perfect solution. But a lifetime of ingrained obedience, of familial duty, held her back. "Ethan, what if my father's right? What if this is all my fault? If I don't marry him, he'll lose everything. We'll lose everything. I can't just walk away and pretend it won't destroy them." Ethan let out a frustrated sigh, pulling her into a tight embrace. "No, Ava. What will destroy you is marrying a man you despise, living a life that isn't yours. Don't do this for him. You need to do what's right for you." Ava's heart ached with each word. He was right. She knew he was, but breaking free from the chains her father had forged felt impossible. Ethan's hands gently stroked her hair, and for a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to lean into his strength. the world feeling marginally less bleak in his arms. But the crushing weight of her perceived responsibility quickly returned. "I need to think," she whispered, her voice weak. "I can't make this decision right now. I need time." Ethan looked at her, pain etched on his face, but he nodded slowly. "I'll be here waiting for you. But Ava, please, don't let your father steal your happiness. You deserve to live the life you want, not the one he's mapped out for you." She stepped back, slowly, feeling Ethan's gaze like a physical weight on her shoulders. As she walked away, back towards the gilded cage of her penthouse, despair descended again, heavier than before. Time was running out, and the prospect of marrying Victor Sterling felt increasingly like a life sentence. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and strained silences. Ava avoided Robert, retreating into the vast emptiness of the penthouse, searching for any semblance of strength within herself. The idea of her life being negotiated like a stock option was abhorrent, but the weight of familial obligation pressed down on her, a suffocating blanket. The shrill ring of the phone shattered the oppressive quiet of the afternoon. Maria, the housekeeper, answered and handed the receiver to Ava, her eyes filled with a pity that only deepened Ava's despair. "It's for you, Miss Ava," Maria said softly, her voice laced with concern. Ava pressed the phone to her ear, her heart already heavy, anticipating the next wave of emotional assault. "Ava, dear," Robert's voice was as firm, as unyielding as granite. "Victor is on his way over for dinner tonight. It's time you two got to know each other better." Ava's stomach lurched. The thought of being in the same room as Victor Sterling, her arranged fiancé, the embodiment of cold calculation, made her physically ill. But refusal wasn't an option. Trapped. She felt increasingly trapped. "Yes, father," she replied, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "I'll be ready." The hours leading up to dinner were spent staring at her reflection, a stranger staring back. The heavy makeup, the stiffly styled hair, the obscenely expensive dress she would never have chosen, Ava felt like a mannequin, meticulously prepped for a life that wasn't hers. The crunch of tires on the driveway sent a jolt of adrenaline through her. Victor Sterling had arrived. She descended the grand staircase slowly, her mind a chaotic swirl of conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to confront Victor, unleash the pent-up rage and frustration. Another part, the deeply ingrained obedient daughter, urged her to be compliant, to play the role expected of her. In the dining room, Victor stood with Robert, engaged in casual conversation. He turned as Ava entered, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, curving his lips. Victor Sterling was exactly as she remembered. Tall, lean, his graying hair neatly styled, his expression perpetually stern, a man who carried the weight of the world, or perhaps simply his vast empire, with detached indifference. His gaze was cold, calculating, assessing, making Ava deeply uncomfortable. "Ava," he said, extending a hand with the practiced cordiality of a businessman closing a deal. "A pleasure to see you again." She shook his hand, feeling the unnerving firmness, the rigidity of his grip. "Likewise, Mr. Sterling." "Please, call me Victor." His smile widened, a formality devoid of warmth. Dinner conversation was superficial, strained. Robert was effusive, practically giddy, expounding on business, future prospects, the synergistic opportunities this union would create. Victor listened with an air of detached amusement, responding only when necessary, as if everything was already a done deal. Ava wasn't a person. With dreams and desires, she was a component of the transaction. Ava picked at her food, her appetite vanished. Her mind wandered, a knot of tension tightening in her chest with every glance Victor directed her way. There was something unsettling in his gaze, something that triggered a primal urge to flee. He wasn't just cold. There was a void in his eyes, an emptiness that suggested any semblance of humanity had long since been extinguished. As dinner concluded, Victor suggested they speak privately. Ava glanced at Robert, a silent plea for intervention, but her father's unwavering gaze communicated the message: comply. "Of course," she said, her voice betraying none of the turmoil within. They walked into the manicured garden, the night breeze rustling through the manicured hedges. The silence between them was heavy, but Victor seemed unperturbed. He strolled beside her, hands clasped behind his back, gazing up at the starless city sky, his expression distant. "You seem hesitant, Ava," he finally stated, without turning to face her. "This is all very sudden for me," she replied, unsure how to articulate the suffocating dread she felt. "I didn't expect my life to take this direction." Victor nodded slowly, as if anticipating her response. I understand. But you must understand, this marriage isn't just about you or me. It's about our families, our legacies. You're not just marrying me, Ava. You're securing your family's future. Frustration welled within Ava. He echoed her father, reducing her existence to a mere familial obligation. She stopped walking, turning to face him, a flicker of defiance igniting within her. I'm not sure this is what I want, Victor. I don't know if I'm the right person for you. He finally turned his gaze to her, and for the first time, Ava saw a shift in his expression, a dark glint in his eyes that sent a shiver down her spine. This isn't about what you want, Ava, he said, his voice low, controlled, laced with a chilling finality. It's already decided. There's no turning back. The knot in Ava's stomach tightened to an unbearable point. The conversation was over. For Victor Sterling, this wasn't a negotiation, it was a decree. He was a man accustomed to getting what he desired, and now he desired her, as part of his empire. As she walked back inside, the feeling of suffocation intensified. With every step, the dark future loomed closer, the chilling certainty that this marriage wasn't merely a financial arrangement, it was a gilded cage, a life sentence. That night, after the unsettling dinner with Victor, Ava felt utterly lost, adrift in a sea of despair. The weight of her reality was crushing, her thoughts spiraling into a vortex of fear and helplessness. Everything was happening too fast, hurtling beyond her control like an avalanche threatening to bury her. The muted warmth of her bedroom offered no comfort, instead feeling stifling, a reflection of her own suffocating anxieties. She stared at her phone for what felt like hours, wrestling with the urge to call Ethan. He needed to know about Victor's visit, about the chilling finality in his words, but she wasn't sure she could bear to articulate the hopelessness that had settled over her. After an eternity of internal debate, she finally dialed his number. Ava? Ethan's voice, calm but laced with worry, filled her ear. Is everything okay? You sound different. I need to see you, Ethan, she whispered, her throat constricting. Now. I can't wait. A pause, then Ethan's reassuring voice. I'm on my way. 30 minutes later, they sat huddled together on a park bench, shrouded in the city's night sounds, far from the prying eyes of anyone who might recognize her. The night air was crisp, but Ava felt only a cold dread. Her heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear. Ethan watched her intently, his brow furrowed with concern. He sensed a shift, a deepening despair in her, and the anxiety in his own chest was palpable. He came tonight, Ethan, Ava began, her voice trembling, raw with emotion. Victor Sterling, my father, he's arranging everything. The dinner. It was a disaster. I don't know what to do, Ethan. I feel trapped. I can't see a way out. Ethan's breath hitched, his face hardening with resolve. Did you talk to him? Did you tell him you don't want this? Ava shook her head, biting her lip, fighting back tears. I did. But Victor isn't the kind of man who takes no for an answer. He's already decided, Ethan. To him, this is just another business deal, another acquisition. I'm just part of it. Ethan clenched his fists, his frustration radiating off him in waves. This is insane, Ava. They can't force you into this. You're a person, not some object. She desperately wanted to believe his words, to cling to the hope that she still had a choice. But the weight of responsibility, the crushing pressure from her father, felt insurmountable. Ethan, if I marry him, my family, they won't lose everything, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't know if I can bear the thought of watching my family fall apart. I feel so torn. Ethan stood abruptly, pacing in front of the bench, his agitation evident. He turned back to her, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and disbelief. And what about us, Ava? What about all the plans we made, the future we dreamed of? Are you willing to throw it all away for a debt that isn't yours? His words struck Ava like a physical blow. He was right, devastatingly right. But the pressure from her father, the ingrained sense of duty, felt like an unbreakable chain. Her heart was fracturing, torn between her loyalty to her family and her love for Ethan. I don't want to lose you, Ethan, she whispered, her gaze fixed on the ground. But what do I do? How can I just run away and let everything crumble? My family, they've always depended on me. My mother, she always taught me that family comes first. Ethan moved closer, taking her hands in his touch grounding her in the swirling chaos of her emotions. Ava, your mother would never have wanted this for you. She would never have wanted you to sacrifice your happiness for something so empty. You're telling me you're willing to spend the rest of your life miserable with a man you don't even know, just to save something that isn't even your fault? Tears finally spilled down Ava's cheeks, but she didn't try to stop them. The knot in her throat was suffocating. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get out of this. Ethan pulled her into a tight embrace. Then we run. Let's leave, Ava. We can start fresh. Far from your father, far from Victor. We don't need the money, the company. All we need is each other. The idea of running away, of leaving everything behind, felt like a fantastical escape, a beautiful impossibility. But for a fleeting moment, Ava allowed herself to imagine it. She and Ethan, a small house somewhere far away, free from the suffocating weight of family expectations. A simple life, but one filled with love and genuine freedom. The vision was intoxicating, almost irresistible, but reality crashed down, cold and relentless. Ethan, I don't know if I can, she whispered, her eyes closing as tears escaped. I don't know if I can leave it all behind. Ethan stepped back slowly, his heart heavy. He wanted to fight for her, to convince her that their love was enough, but he knew the final decision rested with Ava alone. All he could do was wait and pray that she would choose love over duty. I love you, Ava, he said softly, his voice thick with emotion, and I'll always be here, waiting if you decide your future is with me. Ava looked at him, her heart aching, unsure of what to say, what to do. She knew a decision had to be made soon, but in that moment, the pain and confusion overwhelmed her completely. All she knew was that the choice she made now would irrevocably alter the course of her life. Days bled into nights, the pressure on Ava intensifying. The wedding date was set, looming closer like a guillotine. Victor was already behaving as if she were his possession, another asset in his portfolio. Ava felt increasingly like a prisoner, trapped by a destiny not of her choosing, yet seemingly inescapable. Ethan's face haunted her thoughts, a constant reminder of the life she was on the verge of forfeiting. But she remained paralyzed, unable to reconcile her love for him with the crushing weight of familial responsibility. The fear of the unknown, the ingrained duty to her family, suffocated her. As much as she yearned to run away with Ethan, the specter of abandoning her family, of shattering the legacy her mother had cherished, kept her tethered to the impending nightmare. One afternoon, seeking refuge in the manicured gardens of the penthouse, Ava inadvertently overheard a conversation that stopped her in her tracks. Maria, the housekeeper, was speaking on the phone, her voice hushed, worried. Intrigued and driven by a desperate need for any kind of information, Ava concealed herself behind a dense hedge, straining to hear Maria's words. Yes, I know Victor Sterling has a powerful reputation, but Mr. Robert, he truly believes he's doing what's best for the family. He doesn't see what's really behind this deal. I fear, by the time he realizes, it will be too late. He's not the man everyone thinks he is. Ava's heart slammed against her ribs. Victor? Dangerous? Maria's words resonated with the unease she had felt since the beginning. His coldness, the calculating glint in his eyes, the way he treated everything as a transaction. Something had always felt profoundly wrong. She waited, breath held, until Maria concluded her call. Then, steeling herself, Ava emerged from behind the hedge, her eyes fixed on the housekeeper. Maria, what did you mean by that? What do you know about Victor? Maria jumped, startled, as if caught in a forbidden act. Her eyes widened, and for a moment she hesitated, her gaze darting around as if fearing eavesdroppers. Miss Ava, I shouldn't have said anything. I didn't mean to worry you. Please, Maria, Ava pleaded, her voice urgent, desperate. If you know something, anything, I need to know. My life depends on it. Maria glanced around again, confirming their privacy. Then, taking a deep breath, she leaned closer to Ava, lowering her voice to a near whisper. I've heard whispers about Mr. Sterling for years. He buys companies, then dismantles them. He preys on families like yours, Mrs. Ava. He lures them in with promises, and once the contracts are signed, he bleeds them dry, leaving them bankrupt. All he wants is complete control. A chill, deeper than the autumn air, snaked down Ava's spine. Are you saying he's trying to destroy my father's company? Maria nodded grimly. That's what it looks like. There's a trail of ruined families behind him, Miss Ava, and from what I've heard, he won't stop until he has everything. Ava's world tilted. Everything her father was desperately trying to protect. The company, the family legacy, was teetering on the brink of annihilation. And by agreeing to marry Victor, she was unwittingly playing into his twisted game, a pawn in his ruthless power play. What Victor Sterling truly wanted wasn't a wife, it was total dominion over her family's fortune. Without another word, Ava turned and sprinted back towards the penthouse, her heart hammering against her ribs, panic surging through her veins like poison. She had to warn her father. He was being manipulated, blindly walking into a trap, and if they didn't act swiftly, they would lose everything. She found Robert in his office, buried under a mountain of documents and spreadsheets, as always. He barely glanced up as she burst in, his focus entirely consumed by the financial vortex that was threatening to swallow them whole. "Dad, we have to talk," Ava said, her voice trembling, urgent. Robert looked up briefly, a frown creasing his brow as he registered the frantic desperation in her eyes. "Not now, Ava. I'm dealing with the wedding preparations, the financial agreements. Everything has to be perfect." "You don't understand," Ava insisted, her voice rising. "Victor Sterling, he's deceiving us. He doesn't want to save the company, Dad. He wants to destroy it. He's done this to other families before. He's using this marriage to take control of everything." Robert paused, blinking, as if Ava's words were a foreign language, incomprehensible. "What are you talking about?" "I heard it from Maria," Ava explained, her voice trembling. "She knows about other cases. Victor gets involved with families, signs contracts, then he drives them into bankruptcy. He's using us, Dad. If I marry him, we'll lose everything." Robert's expression shifted slowly, from disbelief to a mounting anger. "That's ridiculous, Ava. You're listening to gossip, rumors. Victor Sterling is a respected businessman. He's promised to help us. And you're telling me it's all a lie?" "I know it sounds crazy, but you have to listen. Something's wrong. He doesn't care about our family. He cares about control. Look at the way he acts, Dad. He treats us like pieces in a game." Robert rose abruptly, anger flaring in his eyes. "You're being swayed by your emotions, Ava. This is just fear of facing reality. This marriage is our only chance to survive." "Survive what?" Ava cried, tears streaming down her face. "A life of control? A life where all that matters are numbers and deals? I'm your daughter, Dad. Please, please look beyond the balance sheets for just one moment and see what's happening." Silence descended, thick and suffocating. Robert stared at Ava, but it wasn't the gaze of a father concerned for his daughter's well-being. It was the look of a man who for years had allowed himself to be consumed by ambition, by pride, and now found himself at an emotional precipice. "If you don't marry Victor," he finally said, his voice cold, detached, "we will lose everything. Our reputation, our fortune, our company. And that will be your responsibility." Ava swallowed hard, feeling utterly defeated. Her father wouldn't listen. He was blinded by his own ambition, incapable of seeing the abyss opening before them. She turned and fled the office, tears flowing freely, unchecked. She knew, with chilling certainty, that there was only one person who could help her now. She had to find Ethan. Night had fallen over New York, casting long shadows and bringing with it a sense of urgency that Ava had never felt before. After the devastating confrontation with her father, she knew she was truly alone in the penthouse, adrift in a sea of denial and self-deception. No one was willing to listen. No one understood the terrifying truth she had uncovered. Robert was trapped in his world of spreadsheets and desperate deals, and now Ethan was the only beacon of hope in her darkening world. Ava slipped out of the penthouse, the cold wind biting at her exposed skin as she ran through the deserted streets, towards the garage where Ethan worked. The distance, which once seemed insurmountable, now felt shorter, as if fate itself was propelling her towards the pivotal decision she had to make. When she reached the garage, Ethan was there, alone as always, his solitary figure illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights, wrestling with an engine that looked as weary as Ava's own spirit. He looked up as she entered, and his expression shifted instantly from surprise to deep concern. He saw the raw desperation etched on her face, the unspoken plea in her eyes. He knew instinctively that time was running out. "Ava," he said, wiping grease from his hands with a rag, rushing towards her. "What happened? Why are you like this?" Ava stood before him, breathless, struggling to find the words, but all that emerged was a torrent of raw emotion. "Ethan, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending everything's going to be okay because it's not. Victor, He's going to destroy my family. Everything my father has worked for, it's all going to disappear. Ethan frowned, confusion and growing alarm clouding his features. What are you talking about? Ava ran a hand through her hair, her frustration bubbling over, the panic rising like a tide within her. Victor is using us, Ethan. He's preying on my father's desperation, manipulating him. He's done this to other families before. He promises to save companies, but in the end, he destroys them. If I marry him, it'll be the end of everything. Ethan was silent for a moment, absorbing the gravity of her words. He had always sensed a darkness lurking beneath Victor Sterling's polished veneer, but he had never imagined the extent of his ruthlessness. Now, you can't let this happen. You can't sacrifice yourself because of your father's. Ethan trailed off, searching for the right word. Ava looked at him, her eyes wide with desperation. But if I don't marry Victor, my father will lose everything. He's completely blinded by this deal. He doesn't see the danger. I'm the only thing standing between our family and complete ruin. Ethan gripped her hands tightly, his gaze burning with an intensity she had never witnessed before. And what will happen to you, Ava? Are you going to spend the rest of your life chained to a man you despise, living a lie just to save your family's business? Tears welled in her eyes again, but she fought them back, clinging to a fragile composure. I don't know what to do. I feel so torn. If I run, I leave my father at Victor's mercy. If I stay, I destroy myself. Ethan took a deep breath, his gaze never wavering from hers. You already know what you need to do, Ava. Running away, it's the only option. We can't fight someone like Victor by playing his game, but we can escape. We can start a new life. Far from here. I'll go with you, Ava. Anywhere you want to go. I'll be by your side. His words were a balm to Ava's ravaged soul, yet at the same time they were terrifying. Run away? Leave behind everything she knew, everything her mother had fought to protect. Her father. He would never forgive her. He might never recover financially. But on the other hand, if she stayed, her own soul would wither and die. Ethan, what if I'm being selfish by choosing this? What if, in the end, I destroy everything anyway? Ethan shook his head slowly, his eyes softening as he pulled her closer. Loving someone is never selfish, Ava. What's selfish is giving up your own life for someone else's sake. You have to think about yourself, about what makes you happy. Running away isn't weakness, Ava. Running is your only chance to be free. Be free. The words echoed in Ava's mind, a resonant chord of hope. The thought of finally breaking free from the suffocating control, from the chains of expectation her father had forged around her since childhood, was both terrifying and profoundly tempting. For the first time, the idea of escape felt like a tangible solution, a path to reclaiming her own life. She looked up at Ethan, her voice trembling, a fragile whisper. Okay, let's run. A slow smile spread across Ethan's face, relief and fierce determination warring in his eyes. Tonight, he said, his voice firm. We leave tonight. We don't have time to waste. Victor's going to realize something's wrong, and your father, he won't accept your decision easily. We need to leave now, before it's too late. Ava glanced around the dimly lit garage, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. She knew that crossing this threshold meant severing ties, leaving the past behind, stepping into an uncertain future. But for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope, a chance to choose her own destiny. She nodded, resolute. Let's go. Grabbing a backpack, packing only the bare essentials, Ava followed Ethan out of the garage, out of the city, heading into the unknown. The hum of tires on the highway pavement was a constant drone in her ears, each mile carrying her further away from the gilded prison of her old life. Yet, beneath the fragile hope, uncertainty and fear still lingered. She knew Victor and her father wouldn't simply let her disappear. Running was just the first step. The real fight, she sensed, was still to come. As she stared out the car window, the city lights shrinking into the horizon, Ava felt a complex mix of sadness and a burgeoning sense of liberation. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, a genuine feeling of freedom began to blossom within her. Yes, she was running, but she was also, finally, breaking free. The days following Ava and Ethan's flight were a tightrope walk of anxiety and vigilance. They drove relentlessly, without a fixed destination, their only goal to put as much distance as possible between themselves and New York and Victor Sterling's reach. Ava knew her father would be in a state of panic, and Victor, she was certain, would unleash his full fury. But for stolen moments, As they drove through the changing landscapes, they allowed themselves to entertain the fragile hope of a new beginning. Reality, however, was a persistent shadow. The threat of Victor Sterling loomed, an unseen but ever-present weight. One morning, after they had found temporary refuge in a quiet town upstate, Ava's worst fears materialized. Her father had found them. It was dawn, the sky still bruised with the fading darkness of night, when a thunderous pounding on the door of their small motel room shattered the fragile peace. Ava knew, instinctively, before she even opened the door, who it was. When she swung it open, Robert stood there, his face a mask of fury and disappointment. Beside him, two imposing security guards stood like silent sentinels, their gaze fixed on Ethan, who stood protectively at Ava's side. "Va." Robert's voice was low, controlled, but laced with an undeniable, chilling authority. "We need to talk. Now." Ava glanced at Ethan, who squeezed her hand reassuringly, whispering, "I'll be right here, no matter what he says." Ava followed her father outside, the cold morning air adding to the somber atmosphere. They walked in silence to a secluded corner of the motel parking lot, away from prying eyes. Robert looked exhausted, defeated, but beneath the weariness, a flicker of incandescent rage burned in his eyes. "I can't believe you did this, Ava," he began, his voice tight with emotion. "Running away with him. You're destroying everything I've built, everything I've sacrificed for." Ava felt her chest constrict, but for the first time in her life, she found a wellspring of defiance within her. "I couldn't do it, Dad. I couldn't marry Victor. He doesn't want to help us. He wants to destroy us. And you're so blinded by money, by pride, you can't even see it." Robert shook his head, disbelief etched on his face. "Those are lies, Ava, gossip. Victor Sterling is a respected businessman. He offered us a lifeline, and you threw it all away for some childish fantasy, for a mechanic who can never give you anything but heartbreak." Ava took a deep breath, struggling to maintain her composure. "This isn't a fantasy, Dad. This is real. Ethan is the only one who truly cares about me. He's never treated me like a commodity, never made me feel like my life was just a contract." Robert stepped closer, his voice dropping, becoming more menacing. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life, Ava. Do you even know what love is? Love doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't protect your family name. You'll ruin everything if you continue down this path. He trailed off, his voice thick with bitterness. Ava met his gaze, tears welling, but she refused to let them fall. "Dad, I can't live my life just to serve your ambitions. I need to live for myself. I tried to do what you wanted, but I can't. I won't marry Victor." Silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the distant sounds of traffic. Robert stood there, staring at Ava as if she were a stranger, unrecognizable. For the first time, it seemed, he truly grasped that she was no longer the compliant daughter he had always controlled. "If you go through with this," he said finally, his voice cold, devoid of emotion, "you will be disinherited. You will have nothing. No part of this family, no part of this legacy, and if everything falls apart, it will be because of you." His words were like shards of ice, piercing her heart. But Ava knew with a chilling certainty that there was no other path she could take. "I accept that," she said, her voice steady, despite the ache in her chest. "But I won't sacrifice myself for something I don't believe in." Without another word, Robert turned and walked away, leaving Ava standing alone in the cold morning air, her heart shattered, but her resolve unbroken. She knew her life had irrevocably changed, but for the first time she felt a sense of agency, of control over her own destiny. That afternoon, as Ava and Ethan packed their meager belongings, preparing to leave the motel, to venture further into the uncertain future, something unexpected happened. Ava's phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was from an unknown number. Hesitantly, she answered. "Ava?" Victor Sterling's voice, low, menacing, filled her ear. "You think you can just disappear? You think you can run away from me? Your father owes me, and if you think leaving like this will change anything, you're sorely mistaken." A cold dread coiled in Ava's stomach. "I'm not going to marry you, Victor, and my father, he's made his choice. I'm not part of this anymore." Victor laughed, a chilling, calculated sound that sent shivers down Ava's spine. "This isn't about your father, Ava. You were the most valuable piece in this deal. And now you're going to pay for this. You know you can't hide from me, don't you?" Fear gripped Ava, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I'm not coming back, Victor. Do whatever you want, but I won't be part of your game." "Then prepare for the consequences," he hissed, before abruptly disconnecting. Ava stared at the phone, her hand trembling. Victor Sterling was far from defeated. He was cornered, enraged, and now his wrath was directed squarely at her. The arranged marriage that had been her prison had now become the catalyst for a much larger, more dangerous battle. What had begun as a cold business transaction had escalated into a fight for survival, a clash between freedom and ruthless power. Ava knew, with chilling certainty, that she was now in a war. Running was only the first skirmish. The final confrontation, she realized, was inevitable. And this time, she would have to fight not just for her own freedom, but for everything she held dear. The air crackled with tension in the days following Victor Sterling's ominous call. Ava and Ethan, though they had relocated to an even more remote town, couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted. Victor's threat hung over them, an invisible but suffocating presence. Nights were restless, sleep punctuated by jumpiness, every unfamiliar sound triggering a surge of adrenaline. Despite Ava's defiant stance, Victor's shadow stretched long and dark, casting a pall over their fragile hope for a new life. One sun-drenched afternoon, as they strolled through the town square, attempting to inject a semblance of normalcy into their lives, Ava's phone vibrated with a new message. It was from an unknown number. Hesitation warred with a chilling premonition as she opened it. Her blood ran cold. The message contained a photograph, a recent picture of her and Ethan, taken just that morning in the town square. Accompanying the photo was a short, chillingly direct message. "I know where you are, Ava." The message was clear, unambiguous. Victor was closing in. He wasn't just threatening, he was actively pursuing them. "Ethan," Ava said, her voice barely above a whisper, her grip tightening on his arm, panic rising in her chest. "We have to leave. Now." Ethan glanced at the message, his face hardening, his eyes narrowing with grim understanding. "Let's go. Back to the motel. Grab our things. We need to get out of here before he..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air between them. The walk back to the motel was a blur of frantic energy, each step feeling weighted down by the impending danger. When they reached their room, Ava's anxiety escalated to a fever pitch. They threw their meager belongings into their bags, their movements rushed, frantic, the sense of imminent capture growing with each passing second. But as they reached for the doorknob, ready to flee into the unknown, the door swung inward, blocking their escape. Standing in the doorway, a predatory smile playing on his lips, was Victor Sterling. "I told you it wouldn't be easy, Ava," he murmured, his voice smooth, chillingly calm. "Did you really think you could outrun me?" Ava's heart hammered against her ribs. She glanced at Ethan, her mind racing, searching for an escape route, but she knew, with sickening certainty, they were cornered. Victor wasn't alone. Two hulking security guards materialized behind him, their eyes cold, unwavering, ready to intercept any attempt to flee. Ethan stepped forward, positioning himself protectively between Ava and Victor. "It's over, Victor." Ethan's voice was low, steady, devoid of fear. "Ava isn't going anywhere with you." Victor laughed, a cold, cruel sound that echoed in the small room. "Lost? I haven't lost anything, kid. I still control everything, and now I just need Ava to fulfill her part of the deal." Ava took a deep breath, steeling herself, summoning every ounce of courage she possessed. "I won't marry you, Victor," she stated, her voice clear, unwavering, despite the tremor of fear that ran through her. "I will never be your bargaining chip. Do whatever you want, but I won't give in." Victor's eyes darkened, and for the first time, Ava saw the raw, unmasked face of his ruthlessness, a man driven solely by avarice and an insatiable hunger for power, willing to crush anyone who dared to stand in his way. "If you think you can simply walk away from this," he hissed, stepping closer, his presence filling the small room with menace, "then you truly don't know me at all." He paused, his gaze sweeping over Ava, a flicker of cruel amusement in his eyes. "But I'll give you one last chance, Ava. Come back with me, and this whole unpleasantness ends. I always honor my promises. If you refuse, well, things will become considerably more difficult for you and for your little friend here." Victor's gaze shifted to Ethan, a silent, chilling threat. Ethan's fists clenched, his body tensing, ready to spring into action, but Ava subtly placed a hand on his arm, a silent plea for restraint. "I will never go back with you, Victor," Ava repeated, her voice ringing with defiance, unwavering in its resolve. "And you will never get what you want." Victor stood motionless for a long moment, his gaze locked on Ava, his expression a mask of cold calculation. Then, a cruel smile twisted his lips. "Very well," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "You've made your choice." Without warning, Victor snapped his fingers, a sharp, decisive gesture. Before Ava or Ethan could react, Victor's security guards surged forward, their movement swift, brutal. They seized Ethan, pinning his arms behind his back, while another grabbed Ava, roughly pulling her away from him. Ava's world spun as she was shoved backwards, stumbling, falling heavily to the floor. Victor slowly advanced towards her, his menacing presence dominating the room. "You always had a choice, Ava," he murmured, his voice laced with a chilling satisfaction. "I offered you everything, but you chose this boy. Now you'll pay the price." But before Victor could take another step, before his shadow could fully engulf her, a loud, insistent knocking echoed through the motel room. Everyone froze, startled, the tension in the room momentarily suspended. Victor's eyes narrowed, annoyance flashing across his face. One of his guards reluctantly moved to the door and flung it open. Standing in the doorway, their faces grim, determined, was a phalanx of uniformed police officers. They stormed into the room, their presence shattering the suffocating tension. "Victor Sterling," barked one of the officers, his voice sharp, authoritative. "You're under arrest for extortion and contract manipulation." The officer moved swiftly, snapping handcuffs onto Victor's wrists. Victor stood frozen, stunned, utterly blindsided, his carefully constructed facade of control crumbling around him. Ava, still sprawled on the floor, looked up, her gaze meeting Ethan's, who was just as bewildered, a mixture of relief and utter confusion washing over his face. What's happening?" she stammered, her voice shaky with disbelief. Then, Robert entered the room, following closely behind the police officers. The exhaustion etched on his face was profound, but there was also a flicker of relief, of redemption in his eyes. "I finally saw the truth, Ava," he said, walking towards his daughter, his voice thick with emotion. "Victor, he deceived me. Everything you said, it was true. I found the evidence. All those ruined contracts, all those families he destroyed. He wasn't going to save our company, Ava. He was going to bleed it dry, just like you said." Ava could barely process the unfolding scene, the sudden dramatic reversal of fortune. Her father, the man who had seemed so utterly blinded by ambition, by pride, was now standing before her, finally acknowledging the truth, finally seeing Victor for the predator he was. "I'm so sorry, daughter," Robert continued, his voice breaking, raw with emotion. "I was wrong, Ava, so wrong, and you were right, all along." Victor, now in handcuffs, his face contorted with fury, glared at Robert with pure, unadulterated hatred before being led away by the police, his carefully constructed empire crumbling into dust around him. His security guards, their expressions blank, defeated, were also taken into custody. Ava, with Ethan's help, slowly rose to her feet, feeling a wave of relief wash over her, so potent it almost buckled her knees. Finally, the nightmare was over. Victor Sterling, the looming threat that had haunted her every waking moment, was gone. But the emotional scars, the deep wounds inflicted by the past weeks, remained, a heavy weight in her chest. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, his voice soft, his hand gripping hers tightly, offering a grounding presence in the swirling chaos. Ava nodded, a small, shaky movement, though she knew it would take time, a long time, to fully process everything that had transpired. But in that moment, standing there in the aftermath of the storm, she knew, with profound certainty, that the worst was behind her. She was free, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she felt like her life, truly, finally, belonged to her. Robert, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion, seemed a changed man, humbled, broken, but also somehow liberated. He knew he had come perilously close to losing everything, not just his company, but his daughter, his very soul, blinded by his own ambition. But now they had a second chance, a chance to rebuild, to heal, to start over. "Thank you," Ava whispered, her voice choked with emotion, her gaze shifting between Ethan and her father. "Thank you for finally listening to me." And what did you think of this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to know. Your participation is very important to us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Thank you for watching.